Bună dimineața și bun venit în Institutul Diplomatic Român. Voi vorbi în engleză pentru că evenimentul este în limba engleză. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is our greatest pleasure to host in the Romanian Diplomatic Institute and to co-organize with the Energy Policy Group this event of utmost significance in collaboration. I would like to open my speech by emphasizing that it is imperative to see human rights, equity, and justice as cornerstones of resourcing energy transition and combating climate change. It is high time we work together against the challenges posed by extreme phenomena caused by human-induced climate change, such as rising temperatures and extreme heat that predominantly affect people living in poverty, women, people in precarious health conditions, and workers engaged in physically strenuous jobs, as highlighted by recent UN reports on the urgency of taking action. COP28 represented a tremendous step forward in the fight against climate change. It marked the first time when multilateral negotiations on this issue have resulted in the acknowledgement of the moral, social, and functional imperative to transition away from fossil fuel consumption. In light of this, we look forward to the COP29 event, which among other objectives aims to delve into how climate finance can respond to the necessities of developing countries. Furthermore, COP30 also represents a milestone of great significance. The latter will play, on the other hand, a deeply symbolic role by taking place in Belém, a city with rich Amazonian biodiversity and highly exposed to climate risks, and on the other hand, an instrumental role by signaling the cut-off point for the submission of the nationally determined contributions, which articulate each nation's strategy of achieving the guidelines stipulated under the Paris Agreement. You may ask yourselves, what role does diplomacy play in this convoluted puzzle? My short answer is leadership by example. Taken together, the Republic of Azerbaijan, Brazil, and United Arab Emirates produce the fourth biggest amount of oil at the global level. Their cooperation on environmental issues could be seen as an opportunity to mobilize sustainable action through leadership by example. Interstate cooperation as an intrinsic part of climate diplomacy is also important because it promotes capacity building and thus enhances technological progress, including low-carbon energy technologies. Only by joining forces and acting multilaterally, we can learn from each other and build climate-resilient futures. The Troika is doing exactly this. It proposes a staged process of cooperation, which reflects the necessity of continuous and multi-level action. Against the background of energy diplomacy, global cooperation comes again as being indispensable. According to the World Energy Outlook 2024, I quote, geopolitical tensions are a major risk for energy security and for coordinated actions on reducing emissions. I'm not going to further this discussion because it's fairly controversial, but I'm sure that each of us is thinking in this along these lines. I'm confident that today's event will pave the way for enhanced multilateral cooperation in climate affairs and will be used as proof of the commitment to building resilient futures which have at their center climate awareness. In the end of my introductory speech, I would like to thank to our keynote speakers, to Mr. Mircea Fechet, Minister of Environment, Water and Forests, to Mr. Dan Dragoș Dragan, Secretary of State within the Ministry of Energy, to Mrs. Alexandra Bucșe, State Advisor on Climate and Sustainability, Ionut Sorin Banciu, Secretary of State, Ministry of Environment, Water and Forests, and to Roxana Bojariu, Climate Scientist at the National Meteorological Administration, and not least to Dr. Radu Dudău, President of EPG, for joining forces and for being open and asking the Romanian Diplomatic Institute to host and co-organize this event. And thank you all for participating. Not least, I would like to express my gratitude to His Excellency Gutsi Osmanov, Ambassador of the Republic of Azerbaijan, to His Excellency Ricardo Guerra de Araujo, Ambassador of the Federative Republic of Brazil, for accepting to be keynote speakers and for standing behind the objectives of the upcoming climate conferences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Popescu. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Radu Dudău, President of the Energy Policy Group. We are co-organizers of this event, and we are indeed very grateful to the Romanian Diplomatic Institute and to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for agreeing to join forces with us on this occasion and giving us a hand in taking the diplomatic line of the conversation this time around. We, EPG, are an independent think tank on energy and climate policy. Net zero by 2050 is let's say, defining line of work for us, a direction for us. So we're very committed to policy that organizes our economies towards meeting this paramount imperative. Within the COP framework, we thought it was a very good opportunity just before the start of the climate COP. Right now, there's another COP just ongoing in Colombia. It's the biodiversity COP. Also very, very important and akin to a very important extent to our conversation. But I thought it was a interesting coincidence of sorts that for last year's edition, this year's, and next year, the organizers are three major oil and gas producers. So countries that very interestingly, instructively decided to join the global effort in a leading position to decarbonize. And the key directions will be phasing out fossil fuel, speeding up the buildup of renewable and clean energy sources, ensuring sustainable finance at global level, including the loss and damage fund, so the authorization of this global fund, and certainly social inclusion to a much wider extent than so far. So I will note that for Azerbaijan, the oil and gas industry has been a pillar of their economic development. During the most recent energy crisis, the European Union insisted that Baku increases their gas output in order to supplant the cut-off imports of Russian gas, which they did, but certainly that puts oil and gas producers in a bind when they have to do that, and on the other hand, they have to prepare for a very speedy phase out of fossil fuel. So this is a challenge that I expect the distinguished ambassador of Azerbaijan to address maybe, and also Brazil, also a major oil producer, also gas producer. And there's also the Amazonian forest there, which is, as we know, the lung of the planet, one of the most important carbon sinks of the planet. So Brazil is providing, as other hosts of tropical forests, a global good for the entire planet. And we're very interested to see how Brazil manages to keep this global treasure alive, given the economic pressures upon it. So this would be all from my side by way of opening. I would just add that this event is being transmitted live as we speak, so there is a live audience. Consisting also of diplomatic missions abroad that are interested in preparation for COP29 to see how the conversation moves. And I'm also very pleased that we have a very distinguished lineup of keynote speakers that Liliana Popescu kindly mentioned already. So without further ado, I will turn the floor now to Minister Mircea Fechet, our Minister of Environment and Forests and Waters. Excuse me.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for your invitation, and thanks to the Romanian Diplomatic Institute and EPG for organizing this event, because climate diplomacy and climate change, generally speaking, is a subject that we need to address as often as possible, especially now, where every time you watch a news show on TV, there are probably breaking news about some floods in Europe or somewhere else. But Romania is affected by climate change as well as the rest of the world. And I've had a meeting with my colleagues from the Meteo Agency yesterday, and they said that we not only had the hottest summer ever, and they are recording the temperatures since 1884, but most probably September will be the hottest month ever recorded. And when we look at the numbers, it's more than 3 degrees to the regular temperature. And when we remember what happened not so long ago in Galați, in Vaslui, in Constanța, and a lot of other places, we can say that we need to discuss more about climate change. So back to our discussion. The collaboration between the United Arab Emirates, Azerbaijan, and Brazil at the Conference of the Parties is crucial, because these nations play a key role in shaping the future of our international climate policies. First, let's look at the United Arab Emirates, host of the COP28, because they have demonstrated a strong commitment to the energy transition and sustainability. As a regional leader in renewable energy, the country has invested heavily in solar and wind technologies. COP28 provided a platform to share best practices and promote innovation in the field of green energy. And it's a crucial moment to highlight the importance of diversifying energy sources and international collaboration in this direction. Azerbaijan, by the other hand, which will host COP29, has an equally important role. This country with a fossil-based economy is at a turning point. Hopefully, it will align its energy policies with its global emission reduction commitments, being essential that they will work with the other nations to integrate renewable energy sources into its energy mix, thereby ensuring a fair transition. Brazil is also a vital actor, hosting COP30. With unique biodiversity and vast rainforests, Brazil plays a fundamental role in combating climate change. Collaboration with the United Arab Emirates and Azerbaijan can contribute to the development of global initiatives to protect the environment, promoting sustainable development practices and conservation of natural resources. Brazil can also share experience on ecosystem management and reforestation approaches. The collaboration between the three countries is an example of international continuity and cohesion in the fight against climate change. Each of these nations brings a unique perspective and specific expertise, contributing to global efforts to accelerate the transition to climate neutrality. Extreme climate events and vulnerability of energy infrastructure affect the stability of supply, and equitable access to energy, essential for economic development and social well-being. It's important that the countries will work together to promote a diverse, resilient, and sustainable energy mix, reduce dependence on fossil fuels, and support the uptake of green technologies, including renewable energy and energy store technologies. The energy transition must not only be environmentally friendly, but also socially equitable. Social equity must be a central element of climate policy, ensuring that no community is left behind in the process. Climate diplomacy must focus on balancing energy security, with the decarbonization of the global economy, while ensuring fair access to energy. An inclusive and sustainable economy based on clean energy resources and a low carbon industry will reduce economic risks and create opportunities for sustainable development. Investments in green technologies, modern infrastructure, and circular economic model can boost global competitiveness while ensuring environmental protection. Each conference of the parties provide a platform to address climate changes through international partnership. By sharing knowledge and resources, we can create innovative solutions to deal with the climate crisis. It is essential that these nations work together not only during conferences, but also in the interval between them, setting common goals and supporting each other in achieving them. Romania has the opportunity and the responsibility to support these efforts and play an active role in shaping global environmental and energy policies. Thank you so much.
Going to use this microphone to invite to the floor Mrs. Alexandra Bocșe, State Councilor in the Presidential Administration, responsible for climate policy.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to EPG, who I understand was the driver and actually the one that pushed our Diplomatic Institute to organize this event. I think it's a timely event given the COPs, but also outside of the COP framework, we need to think more about climate diplomacy. Now, in my intervention today, I will actually focus on some actions of climate diplomacy that we took at the national level, and in particular that Romanian presidential administration and President Iohannis took at the national level. Because after working with the president for 4 years, and I'm going to give you some examples, I think I can fully confidently say that President Iohannis was, and the presidential administration was, a pusher of climate diplomacy. We were the ones that actually reached out 3 years ago to the ministry and asked about the creation of a network of climate embassies. And Romania has now a loose network of climate embassies, of green embassies that actually focus more on environmental and climate policies in different parts of the world, because there was that push from President Iohannis and from the presidential administration. We also have outreached several times, and I do understand that there are some technical limitations to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and through the Diplomatic Institute regarding the training of diplomats. I think in any curriculum related to the preparation of diplomats, we should have courses on climate and energy diplomacy. And I understand that currently there are some budgetary and technical limitations, but we dearly need this training and we need these diplomats at work. Now, as far as the Romanian presidential administration is concerned, needless to say that climate change is a topic for the presidential administration. That's why our department is called Climate and Sustainability. So the environmental department in the presidential administration is called Climate and Sustainability, because we recognize, and President Iohannis recognizes, the systemic and the great challenge that climate change poses, with implications on biodiversity, on environmental factors in general, on economy and on society. Because climate change, unlike we hear sometimes around, it's not necessarily an environmental topic. It's a society and economy topic equally, with multiple implications. So we chose at the presidential administration actually to focus our action on climate. And of course, because the president of the country, as you well know, has a broader mandate on external affairs, as well as on defense. Of course, there was a lot of space actually for the president to be active in external environmental and climate relations. So we also pushed for the integration of, one of the areas of action was pushing for the integration of Romania in different international structures. For instance, the OECD program, the international program on climate action. The EU initiative, Digital for Development, for instance, or the International Solar Alliance that Romania joined last year at the COP. Also, the president has represented Romania, and it's representing currently Romania in the European Councils when environmental and climate topics are discussed. And I will remind you that the neutrality target for 2050 at the European level and Fit for 55 by 2030 were established at the European Councils in 2019 and 2020. And, you know, President Iohannis was a great supporter of these targets. Also, in the last years, Romania has attended, since the establishment of the Department of Climate and Sustainability at the presidential administration, Romania has attended the COPs, the multilateral negotiations, where the main framework for climate action at global level is set, has attended these negotiations with a large delegation. So I invite you numerically and in terms of initiatives and topics covered to compare maybe our action in 2019 with our action after 2021. And the delegation of Romania was led by President Iohannis, and we were involved also in coordinating different ministries to adopt different initiatives that needed a cross-ministerial conversation. I will also mention that actually the first multilateral environmental event organized by Romania ever was hosted by President Iohannis, actually at COP27 in Egypt. It was an event attended by 10 heads of state and government. It was organized by the Department of Climate and Sustainability, the presidential administration, with some support from the Romanian government. It was an event on promoting climate change education. So this was actually the first environmental and climate event in a multilateral setting organized and initiated by Romania, and it was very well received. I will also mention that in his official visits abroad, and I do understand that there were some controversy around certain visits in the public space, but in the last visits that the President Iohannis conducted in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, there was always a climate and a green component. And this was because also our partners in these countries actually expect Romania to be engaged on its issues. And I'm very thankful to the president that he always agreed when I suggested to have this component in his speech, in his elements of his visits, that he was very supportive. Now, this component in the file of the president for visits abroad, for bilateral visits, was actually prepared at the level of the Department of Climate and Sustainability. So we had a lot of work to do, but we are actually happy that we managed to bring this green element in the bilateral relations of Romania over the last 2 years. I'm mentioning this because usually the file for the president, when he actually has an official visit, comes from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the exception of the file on external, environmental, and climate affairs, which was basically pasted in. And I'm grateful that the president accepted for this to happen, and also Maya agreed with this approach. But on the long term, honestly, I think that the whole file should come from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, also having a strong green and climate dimension. That said, I also want to mention some of the official visits that President Iohannis received, and that were very much focused on environmental and green affairs. And we are talking about the Vice President of the European Commission. We are talking about meetings with John Kerry, the Special Presidential Envoy of the President of the United States on climate change. And also, of course, there were certain bilateral meetings with the Prince of Wales at that point, and now King Charles, that happened at COP29 or happened at COPs. So these were bilateral events, bilateral meetings that helped solidify again this bilateral cooperation and the green dimension of our bilateral cooperation with strategic partners, including the United States. I'm very thankful that I had this opportunity to kind of stress, giving very clear examples how the mandate of President Iohannis brought actually some elements of green and climate diplomacy. And I'm hoping that in the future, there will be the same interest and the same drive from the presidential administration and the future president for these dimensions. And of course, I'm hoping that other institutions in the Romanian state that have supported us will continue to support this topic of climate and green diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bokche. I think your suggestions regarding, let's say, an update of the diplomatic training are should be well taken, and we can only applaud you for the effort you put into the climate agenda all along these years within the presidential administration. Now, I would like to finally invite to the microphone State Secretary Dan Dragan of the Energy Ministry. He is in charge with the green portfolio and indeed a very dedicated dignitary to these policies. Mr. Dragan.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's an honor for me to be present today here. Congratulations, EPG and Romanian Diplomatic Institute for organizing this debate. It's very important based on the facts that already have been emphasized by Mr. Bokche and by Minister Fekete about the climate changes that today we are facing. And only acting together, uniting our efforts, we will be able to reach our targets, the targets on which Romania already adopted, that I'm referring to the 2015 target, that means reaching the carbon neutrality. Based on that, again, I would like to emphasize some aspects that my colleagues prepare regarding COP28, the former COP28, the new COP29, which will gonna be held in November in Baku, and the COP30 that will take place in Brasilia next year. Referring to Romania, we have to say that we have all the assets to become a pillar of stability for our neighboring countries and the region in which Romania is located, providing a viable alternative to all other resources, especially carbon resources that are coming from Russia to this region. We have a new energy strategy and its final phase of approval. We considering the need to accelerate the green transition and to improve the energy security. The strategy aims to accelerate the green transition and to ensure the balance between affordable prices for customers and support for economic competitiveness, gradual transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy sources, and development of storage capacities, and to improve the energy efficiency as well. The energy strategy encourages investment that align the energy sector with Romanian needs for tomorrow. Our goal is clear. Romania must have a safe, affordable, and clean energy. In a complex economic and geopolitical context, we must respond to new challenges and use innovations solutions intelligently. We are committed to developing an energy sector that is an essential pillar of the country's development, capable to ensure security, sustainability, and accessibility of energy for all our citizens. We have the necessary resources, financial and human resources, to modernize our energetic sector. Our aim is to transform Romania in a gateway for energy resources from Caspian and Black Sea areas through the development of intelligent and digitalized transport networks, which make it possible to accommodate and insert significant volumes of energy from green sources. The main objective that we are pursuing is swift decarbonization of the energy sector in Romania by increasing the use of energy from renewable sources. Romania is committed to add to its effort the development of clean technologies, such as hydrogen and carbon capture and storage. Hydrogen, once integrated in the energy system, will have an important role in decarbonizing the process of industrial processes and the achievement of European objective of climate neutrality and reduction of dependence on fossil fuels. The vision of our national energy hydrogen strategy and action plan is to develop the hydrogen economy with a focus of green hydrogen to reduce the carbon footprint and to ensure sustainable and competitive economic and technological development, especially for hard to decarbonize sectors such as industry and transport. And last but not the least, to increase the contribution of hydrogen to decarbonize the energy sector. We estimate that the national hydrogen strategy could be approved by the government decision by the end of this year or in the first quarter of 2025. Regarding the cooperation with the Republic of Azerbaijan, we consider that the Green Corridor project represents an important step in development of a modern and sustainable energy infrastructure for the countries involved, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Romania, and Hungary, and also for the entire region. Together with the Green Corridor project, Romania also takes advantage of the importance nuclear power holds for the creation of a process of a carbon-neutral world. With the help of our strategic allies, American partners, and Canadian as well, we are on the forefront for continuing our nuke development program with 2 additional units in Cernavoda based on CANDU technology. And on the same time, we are on the forefront of small modular reactor development, thus opening the way for more regional and international cooperation, which will increase the usage of nuclear energy in the mix of many countries. Along these advantages, the development of small modular reactors will also provide the opportunity of knowledge exchange between Romania and the other countries in the region, thusly forging stronger ties. Regarding international cooperation, Romania has increased its presence in the domain of global climate diplomacy through agreements that benefit both economic and environmental aspects. One such agreement is the joint venture planned as a project of the Romanian-owned company Hidroelectrica and the UAE-owned company Masdar. This joint venture shall focus on 3 main areas: solar energy plant, floating PV panels, and more efficient batteries. This technology will help Romania accumulate more knowledge in the mentioned area, and at the same time, they represent a bridge which shall connect our countries to like-minded countries situated further on the globe. In this manner, Romania can conduct a comprehensive climate diplomacy and advance in the international goal of efficient and equitable transition towards zero. Having said that, Romania has not forgotten the role it must play as a stabilizing factor in its region. Therefore, we have supported the efforts directed towards interconnecting the transport system between Romania and the ones of Ukraine and Republic of Moldova. This will allow for the transportation of important quantities of energy from European markets towards these 2 countries, thusly reducing their dependency of Russian energy resources. A more united Europe in terms of distribution and transport of energy means a better protected Europe, and Romania plays and will continue to play an important role toward this goal. Thank you very much again, and I am pretty sure that the results of the debates today will bring us important aspects that we will have to take care in our defining strategy and policy in this domain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dragan, for this well-rounded presentation of Romania's energy policies. I know that your time is very limited, but I thought we could use the opportunity for taking 1 or 2 questions from the audience for the keynote speakers, if there are any. So apparently not. Feel free to dare. But if not, then I think we'll just thank again the keynote speakers with a round of applause and our gratitude for taking up your time.
We are moving now towards the second, the first panel. So we are inviting the 2 ambassadors to take their seat.
All right. We'll invite you now to come to the front table. All right. It is now my pleasure to moderate the first panel conversation of this mini conference on the progress COP29 and COP30. And I'm very delighted to have two very distinguished panelists with us. Mr. Gudzi Osmanov, Ambassador of the Azerbaijan Republic, and also His Excellency Ricardo Guerra de Araujo, Ambassador of the Federative. I will just say by way of opening that other than the main typically close the COP conferences, so the main goals, the main takeaways from these global conferences, a very critical aspect as well, ensuring continuity, ensuring that from one COP conference to the next, we have consistency, we have alignment of purposes and of action. So in this spirit, we want to convene this conversation. And of course, we should start with the representative of Azerbaijan as a host of this year COP conference on climate. As I was saying, Azerbaijan, just like in a way, like the country that hosted COP28, the United Arab Emirates, and also similar to, in an important aspect, to Brazil in 2025, the host of the 2025 COP, a major oil and gas producer. Oil and gas are defining critical goods for the Azerbaijan economy, and it's very interesting to see how the country manages this kind of span, this kind of tension between consolidating an oil and gas economy and moving towards a clean economy. The ambassador of Azerbaijan, we will have for our non-Romanian speakers translation into English. So, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Dear guests,
I think you have to press the button, Your Excellency. Yeah.
Dragi invitați, în primul rând aș dori să mulțumesc conducerii Institutului Diplomatic Român și IPC pentru organizarea evenimentului. Consider că acesta este un eveniment mai mult decât oportun la acest moment.
dear guests, first of all, I would like to thank the management of the Romanian Diplomatic Institute and EPG for organizing the event. I believe this is a more than timely event at this moment.
Desfășurarea COP29 în Azerbaijan este importantă nu numai pentru Azerbaijan, ci și pentru toate țările din regiune.
Holding the 29th COP in Azerbaijan is important not only for Azerbaijan, but also for all countries in the region.
Securitatea mediului, durabilitatea mediului și creșterea ecologică sunt o parte importantă a politicii de stat a Azerbaijanului.
Environmental security, environmental sustainability, and ecological growth are an important part of Azerbaijan's state policy.
Anul 2024 a fost declarat anul solidarității pentru o lume verde în țara noastră.
The year 2024 was declared the year of solidarity for a green world in our country.
În plus, a fost aprobat documentul Azerbaijan 2030, priorități naționale de dezvoltare socioeconomică, una dintre cele 5 priorități, ele acestea fiind un mediu mai curat și dezvoltare în domeniul ecologiei.
In addition, the document Azerbaijan 2030 National Priorities of Socioeconomic Development was approved, one of its 5 priorities being a cleaner environment and development in the field of ecology.
O importanță deosebită o are potențialul mare al Azerbaijanului în domeniul energiei solare și eoliene, precum și în domeniul bioenergiei. Unul dintre obiectivele strategiei ale Azerbaijanului este de a organiza tranziția de la o economie bazată pe carbon la economie ecologică.
Of particular importance is Azerbaijan's great potential in the field of solar and wind energy, as well as in the field of bioenergy. One of Azerbaijan's strategic goals is to organize the transition from a carbon-based economy to a green economy.
Una dintre principalele aspecte la care Azerbaijanul acordă atenție este exportul de energie verde. Acesta este motivul pentru care acordurile privind producția de energie regenerabilă în Azerbaijan au fost semnate cu companii străine deosebit de importante.
One of the main aspects that Azerbaijan pays attention to is the export of green energy. That is why agreements on the production of renewable energy in Azerbaijan have been signed with the particularly important foreign companies.
În plus, proiectele de energie regenerabilă sunt implementate cu sprijinul unor organizații financiare internaționale, precum Banca Mondială, Banca Europeană pentru Reconstrucție și Dezvoltare și Banca Asiatică de Dezvoltare.
In addition, renewable energy projects are implemented with the support of international financial organizations such as the World Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and the Asian Development Bank.
După cum este cunoscut, în noiembrie 2022 a fost semnat acordul privind parteneriatul strategic în domeniul dezvoltării și transportului de energie verde între Azerbaijan, Georgia, Ungaria și România. Transmiterea energiei verzi prin Marea Neagră printr-o linie de cablu va crea un coridor de energie verde între Marea Caspică, Uniunea Europeană.
As it's known, in November 2022, the agreement on strategic partnership in the field of development and transport of green energy between Azerbaijan, Georgia, Hungary, and Romania was signed. Transmitting green energy across the Black Sea via cable line will create a Caspian-European Union green energy corridor.
În cadrul COP29, Azerbaijan a prezentat inițiative care vor inova procesul COP. De exemplu, înființarea Fondului de Acțiune pentru finanțarea combaterii schimbărilor climatice și apelul global pentru încetarea focului. COP30. Inițiativa
At the 29th COP, Azerbaijan presented initiatives that will innovate the COP process. For example, the establishment of the Climate Action Fund and global ceasefire call, COP30.
Inițiativa armistițiului COP a fost susținută până în prezent de 127 de țări și aproape 1100 de acționari nestatili, precum și de numeroase celebrații și lideri religioși. Participarea șefilor de stat și de guvern din 90 și 7 de țări la summitul liderilor mondiali privind acțiunile climatice din 12-13 noiembrie a fost deja confirmată.
The COP ceasefire initiative has so far been supported by 127 countries and nearly 1,100 non-state stakeholders, as well as numerous celebrities and religious leaders. The participation of heads of state and government from 97 countries at the Summit of World Leaders on Climate Action on November 13 has already been confirmed.
În plus, numărul participanților înregistrați la COP29 a depășit acum 32.000. Numărul participanților din întreaga lume care și-au exprimat interesul de a participa la conferința crește în fiecare zi.
In addition, the number of registered participants at the 29th COP has now exceeded 32,000. The number of participants from all over the world who have expressed their interest in attending the conference is increasing every day.
În concluzie, aș dori să remarc faptul că Azerbaijanul, în calitate de participant și inițiator al unor proiecte energetice și de transport la scară largă în regiune, este angajat față de pacea și stabilitatea în regiune. Credem că semnarea unui acord de pace cu Armenia în viitorul apropiat va aduce o contribuție suplimentară la viața pașnică și prosperarea a tuturor popoarelor din regiune.
In conclusion, I would like to note that Azerbaijan, as a participant and initiator of large-scale energy and transport projects in the region, is committed to peace and stability in the region. We believe that the signing of a peace agreement with Armenia in the near future will make a further contribution to the peaceful and prosperous life of all the people of the region.
Vă mulțumim pentru atenție.
Thank you for your attention. I would also like to mention that Mr. Ambassador is learning Romanian for just 7 months, and we appreciate a lot his effort.
Felicitări, domnule ambasador. We're impressed by the quality of your Romanian after we understand a short time of trying to crash it. So we will return, I suppose, to a few points of your intervention at the end. Until then, I'm pleased to invite to the floor His Excellency Ricardo Guerra de Araujo, Ambassador of Brazil.
Yeah, it's on. Can you hear me? Yeah. Good morning, everyone. It's a real honor and privilege to be here today. Let's start my very brief, short intervention by saying thank to the organizers of this very important event and to our host, Mrs. Popescu, director of this institute, which is a academic reference in the Romanian administration, Mr. Dudau, president of EPG, Ambassador Osmanov. I was very impressed with your Romanian skills, and I wish I could speak Romanian as you do. And I'm very jealous, so maybe I should make a more effort and try to learn Romanian more quickly. But well, thank you very much for inviting or for this invitation and for the opportunity to share Brazil's views concerning global climate change and the next COP30 to be take place in Brazil, more precisely in the nice and cozy city of Belém do Pará in the north part of Brazil. What I'm going to share with you today is the views of the perspective of our developing country. And because now we call a global south country is the new terminology. In the past, it was developing country, third world countries, but this kind of terminology keeps, being updated, and now we call it the global south. And so, what I'm going to share with you today is some views of this one of these members of this global south, as we call it today. My intervention will be divided in three main blocks. Don't worry, it's not going to be very long. The first block will be dedicated to climate change and the road ahead. Second block, very important, the role of the private sector in all these discussions about fighting climate change. And the third block is, of course, the COP30 to be organized by Brazil in 2025 in the north part of the country. Coming back to the first block, climate change and the road ahead. The best available science and recent events around the world demonstrate, beyond any doubt, the urgency for the international community to intensify efforts to keep global warming within the limits agreed upon the Paris Agreement. Our challenge is to increase ambition in the national targets we have set ourselves, the NDCs, while simultaneously accelerating and expanding concrete action, including the rapid mobilization of climate finance, technology, and capacity building, as was promised by the developed countries, including, of course, European countries, members of the European Union. The most vulnerable ones are already in a disproportional way, I would say, carrying the burden of our actions and the consequences of our inaction. We have no time to waste. The road to COP30 will be decisive for humanity's success in combating climate change, especially towards the goal of limiting the global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Reaching the goal of 1.5 imposes unprecedented challenges, which require an equally unprecedented collective response. Between now and the COP30 in Brazil, countries will present their next round of commitments under the Paris Agreement of the Climate Convention, the so-called nationally determined contributions, which the NDC stands for. It will be important for the integrated set of NDCs to align global efforts within the 1.5 objective. We hope that COP29, is taking place in November in Baku, will adopt a new collective quantified goal on climate change to meet the needs and priorities of developing countries. Therefore, 2024 will be a defining year for climate finance to match fair transitions to a low carbon and climate resilient societies in the context of sustainable development and of efforts to eradicate poverty. Always bearing in mind, the three pillars of, as many Brazil, as many other global South countries, and I believe also Romania within the European Union supports with the three pillars, this multi-dimensional approach, which is of course environmental, but also social and economic. We cannot approach or you cannot discuss this matter without taking into consideration these three main approaches: environment, social, and economic. Many occasions, it was mentioned that, the tropical forest in Brazil and the Amazon as a sort of the lung of the world, etc. But we Brazilians, and we always reminding people that this is a major geographic area in Brazil. The Amazon state, or the Amazon, the tropical forest is placed, corresponds to around almost 52% of the Brazilian territory. 52%. So where about 25 million people live in this area. So that's why when we stressed, the importance of bearing in mind the three pillars: economic, social, and environmental, is to, of course, to have this to not to forget that we have to meet our challenges to fight against climate change, but this is not the only challenge. This should be, of course, working hand in hand with the other two pillars, which are social and economic. In parallel, under the Brazilian presidency of the G20, Brazil is now presiding the G20 group, and the summit will take place in Rio at the end of this year. And of course, within this G20, Brazil is pushing very hard, of course, the climate change, the fight against climate change agenda. The task force for a global mobilization against climate change, as I mentioned, is working on the structural changes needed for global macroeconomic and financial alignment towards the 1.5 degrees Celsius. This has become a sort of a magical number, 1.5. We have been hearing this for so many years, but it's still in the agenda, and we still have to make it happen, because this is the target that all the countries have agreed to implement. The block number 2 of my intervention is the role of the private sector. The fight against climate change demands a whole of society approach, of course, including efforts from the private sector. We need to boost the mobilization of public and private finance towards sustainable development, climate resilience, job and income generation, technological progress, and industrial growth. The implementation of Article 2.1, letter C, of the Paris Agreement is urgent. Despite consistent growth over the years, global annual climate financial flows are still insufficient, most of which is concentrated in high-income countries and China in mitigation climate action. The global stocktake, the GST decision, recognizes the role of the private sector in climate finance and highlights the need to strengthen policy guidance, incentives, regulations, and enabling conditions to reach the scale of investments required to achieve a transition towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. The third block concerns the organization of COP30 in Brazil. In a context of climate urgency and geopolitical challenges, the COP30 to be held in Brazil will provide a great opportunity to incentivize meaningful topics to Brazilian society within the framework of the climate regime, connecting these debates to the priorities identified in the context of the Brazilian presidencies, the current presidencies of the G20 this year, and Brazil is also taking the presidency of the BRICS, next year, alongside with the COP30 we are organizing in the city of Belém. And in all this regional international fora, Brazil, of course, among other countries, are pushing very hard the fight against climate change agenda. As its guiding thread, COP30 could bring the agenda of fair transitions towards low carbon and climate resilient economies, based on the promotion of sustainable development and the fight against hunger, poverty in general, and inequalities. Always, again, sorry to be repetitive, always bearing in mind the 3 pillars: environmental, social, and economic. So the COP30 aims to be a milestone in strengthening global climate action in this decade, in all pillars of the Paris Agreement, namely, number 1, mitigation, collective alignment to the 1.5 objective of the new NDCs to be formally communicated by countries by February 2025. Number 2, adaptation, which means conclusion of the UAE Belém work program on indicators for global adaptation goal adopted at COP28. Number 3, financing. Key point, Without financing, we cannot do anything. So it means follow-up to the expected adaptation of the new climate finance objective at the COP29 and the results of Brazil's presidency of the G20 at the end of this year, to regulate under the UNFCCC the alignment of global financial flows with the Paris Agreement. Again, I remind you, Article 2.1, in favor of investments in developing countries for mitigation and adaptation. Number 4, capacity building, very important factor too, which means about the creation of an institutional strengthening mechanism for developing countries, linking the work of Brazil's G20 presidency this year and the designing climate packages for the industrial policies and attracting investments to the COP30 in 2025. Number 5, technology. Operationalization of the new technology implementation program and digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, of course, to accelerate and scale emissions reductions and build resilience. And last but not the least, number 6, fair transitions, protecting workers' rights and combining the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. And I'm going to repeat again this very old principle supported by many developing or global South countries, which is the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, with the objectives of sustainable development, with an emphasis on combating inequalities between and within countries, and considering the historical responsibilities of developed countries for climate change. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for this rich tour de table that you did through the entire topic of challenges raised also the previous COP edition. And in terms of consistency, I think you addressed them. But if there are now questions from the audience, we could have a few, including the online audience. If not, yeah, I would like to maybe encourage a bit of conversation for a few minutes among us, if you don't mind. So I would start with Ambassador Guerra de Araujo, so the Ambassador of Brazil. You emphasized you rightly emphasized the common but differentiated responsibilities. So the special moral responsibility of the global North, if you like, as opposed to the global South, in ensuring finance and then technology transfer. Although these days, in all honesty, most of the technology comes from China. China is geographically in the northern hemisphere, but it's part of the global South. That's a bit of the conundrum with this categories. And it's also interesting that the world's largest emitters at this point, China and India, have not committed to net zero by 2050, which of course poses challenges of coordination and efficacy of policies taken by countries and blocs. I mean, one of the questions that we have to face in the European Union is whether the very ambitious policies that we're undertaking are efficient when global emitters are not playing along. You also emphasized Brazil's role as a G20 president and also as upcoming president of BRICS. Brazil has certainly become a global player these days. The current Brazilian administration is much more cooperative in terms of global climate policy than previous one. And yeah, maybe what is the special role that Brazil is undertaking as a global player? So Brazil is not just a developing country; it's really a global actor. So what do you think the world should be listening more to Brazil in terms of climate action?
Thank you very much for the question. You put me on a hot spot here, but thank you for your kind words. First of all, concerning my country, I don't think Brazil is a global player, but more a regional player than a global player. With soft power we can provide in different topics of the international agenda, and of course. When I mentioned this principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, it doesn't mean that we should not continue or put all our efforts to fight against climate change. I mean, it doesn't exempt any responsibility of fighting now against climate change. The only thing is that we put this the whole international negotiations on climate under this perspective. Because, as you said, you correctly said, without financing, without technology, and without a real political will to fight climate change, all the burden remains on the back of the developing countries. They are still struggling to develop. And that's why I repeatedly mention, the three pillars: environmental, social, and economic, because it's easy to say, now you cannot develop anymore because you now have only to take care about the environmental aspects of your policy. And that's the challenge, I guess, is to find the right balance between how to take care of the social and economic development of the development of a developing country, and at the same time tackle the problem of fighting climate change. The whole challenge is there, and that's why Brazil has been developing renewable energies in the last few years, in spite of being one of the top oil producing countries in the world. Almost more than 70% of the energy consumption in Brazil comes from hydro. So oil is not, when we look at the Brazilian energy matrix, oil is not so important as in other countries or even in other European countries, because we have a lot of rivers, and most of this energy production comes from hydro. And of course, we have been investing very heavily in other renewable energies, such as solar and eolic, and the energy of the future with the green hydrogen. And without mentioning that since the 1970s, Brazil has developed a program, the ethanol program. But some people say the ethanol is not so green because it comes from the sugar cane, and when you do plantations, you make sometimes there is allegations of deforestation in order to grow sugar cane. But the fact is, since the oil crisis back in 1973, and then the second oil crisis in 1979, Brazil has developed this new technology. It was one of the pioneers in the international community, where cars could run with ethanol and fuel and gasoline at the same time in a mix that you as a consumer, you can choose if your car is going to run with oil or with ethanol. In different, it depends, because since the prices vary, when you go to the gas station to fill your tank, you see the price of ethanol and you see the price of oil, and you choose which one is cheaper and which one you are going to fill your tank to run for 2, 3, 4 days. So Brazil was a pioneer in this renewable energy approach or renewable energy investment back in the 1970s, and it still is investing and implementing national policies. And of course, the present administration of Brazil is radically different from the previous administration, which, well, to say the least, fight climate change was not at the top of the agenda, which is not the case nowadays under President Lula administration. It's a big country. We have to recognize nothing is easy to control deforestation in such a big area of the tropical forest in the Amazon part of the country. Can you imagine? Yeah, only this part, Amazon forest is almost the same size of Europe, of Western Europe, taking Russia away. So sometimes it's very difficult to be present and to try to control everything that is going on in this vast geographical area of Brazil. So, but this administration is very much engaged in protecting the tropical forest and in diminish, the deforestation in this part of Brazil. So basically, this is the message of the Brazilian new administration is trying to deliver around the world, either in the G20, the BRICS, on the regional, international, and of course, the main event concerning climate change, which is the COP30 to take place in Brazil next year.
Thank you very much for these clarifications, Ambassador. On a similar note, I would like now to turn to you, Excellency, and ask you a question that it's maybe more salient from our vantage point at EPG. We are a think tank on energy and climate policy. So we definitely salute this initiative collaboration on the Green Corridor between Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Romania. We're sort of neighbors across the Black Sea. We in Romania are deeply perceptive about everything that occurs in the Black Sea region, or as we call it sometimes. And maybe for some, the idea of a undersea cable, high voltage cable, some may be a bit skeptical, considering that Romania had considered such an enterprise between Constanța and Istanbul about a decade ago, and eventually the project was dropped. But let's hope that this time around there is more decisiveness. And also, I am personally curious, where would those renewable sources would come from? Maybe you can elaborate a bit on Azerbaijan's renewable sources production, because we are not very aware, maybe because we associate Azerbaijan with oil and gas in the first place, with these developments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your interesting question. I would like to tell some words and explain a little bit. Azerbaijan and Romania, it's very important countries, which is located between east and west. It's connecting east and west. Caspian Sea and Black Sea, and also other countries is connected the logistic projects, connecting logistic projects. This two seas. And I would like to mention also one thing, as we can see and program it, that the relations between the neighbor countries in the region, especially between Azerbaijan and Armenia, we see that we see the positive dynamic. And we hope that there will be as soon as will be signed the peace agreement between the neighbor countries. I mean, in the South Caucasus between our neighbors, and it will give us more possibilities for development. Azerbaijan is playing the role for the energy security for European countries. And what are we doing now, honestly speaking? For Azerbaijan, we're buying the gas from Russia. But the gas which we have in our country, in Azerbaijan, we're supplying to European countries, to European market. And what about the green energy projects? I would like to mention that Azerbaijan is a windy country. And we can, from the wind, we can produce the sun energy and supply it to European region. There is a project already. It's ready project, the green energy project that is supplying the energy from the under the through the Black Sea. In this project, there are 4 countries. It's Azerbaijan, Georgia, Romania, and Hungary. And we hope that in future, the Asian countries, it's Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan can be connected to this project. We hope, and as we see that these projects, most of them have the great future. And even in the COP29 in Baku, we hope that there will be a lot of meetings, and we hope that a lot of agreements will be signed in Baku. And I would like to mention that there is agreement already approved that the main office of the green energy projects will be opened in Bucharest, in Romania. And I would like to mention also that we are making a huge job in Azerbaijan. We're planting a lot of plants, trying to contribute to this sector. But I would like to mention that Romania and Azerbaijan will play a huge role between connections to connect also Asia and Europe. And the initiative are coming from Romania and Azerbaijan. I would like that everyone can understand it because it's a reality.
Thank you very much. It's a positive note. Let's hope project will come to fruition. Now, after this extended clarifications, there is again a bid for questions from the room or from the online audience. Yes, of course.
To come back to your question that I didn't reply completely about China, the role of China, even if China geographically is in the south, I don't know if it can be considered a developing country. It's I get no doubt that China today is a superpower and competing shoulder by shoulder with the United States, not only economically but also on military ground, etc. So it's a big actor. And of course, you're completely right when you say we cannot do anything without the supporting and of China, and that's where international trade starts to play an important role. China is one of now the major producing countries of electrical cars, solar panels, etc., etc. And many countries are worried about this because China is very competitive, as we know. It's Brazilian first trade partner for the last 15 years. It's an important trade partner of the European Union, of the United States, etc. And this is the coming challenge: what to do with free trade. I mean, we all know, following by the press, what the U.S. administration is doing concerning the imports of electrical cars from China. And I was discussing this matter with Mrs. Popescu before we started this conference today, and so we can argue, are electrical cars really green compatible? It certainly helps to diminish the emission of carbon, but because of the batteries and everything that goes along with the produce of batteries of these cars, people are now arguing if it's really a green compatible or not. But the fact is that all this environmental economy or green-based economy has been stumbling against trade barriers nowadays because people want to protect their own national markets against exports of electrical cars or whatever, of solar panels, etc. And this is the one of the challenges that also linked to this thing or to this idea or to this global challenge of fighting climate change. So, and China, of course, we should bring China on board because without you're completely right. Without China, we cannot talk about fighting climate change or India as well.
Totally agree, and it is of course unfortunate that now that we have to speed up technology transfer, we're facing this geopolitical fault line in global politics. Well, I think with this, now that we are a bit late, we should wrap up the first panel. We are thanking again our distinguished panelists with a round of applause, and then I will pass the torch for the next panel to my colleague, Mihnea Cătuț, Head of Research at EPG. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I know it's already been quite a lot of speaking. There's only one panel left. I assure it's going to be the best one. We're going to have some intense discussions about Romania's regional role in climate action, also linked to global climate diplomacy. And for that, I would like to invite next to me the panelists for this panel. First of all, Mr. Andrei Țărnea, Director General at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Ionuț Sorin Banciu, Vice President at the National Agency for Reglementation in the area of mining, oil, and more recently carbon capture and storage. And last but not least, for certain, Ms. Roxana Bojariu, who's a senior climate scientist and the head of the research group on climate at the National Meteorological Association. Yeah, please be seated and thank you very much for being with us. We're left with some discussions of substance, which I hope to engage in over the next 50 minutes or so. To the speakers that arrived later, just wanting to let you know that besides the audience here in the room, we have a group from the network of embassies that focus on climate joining us on Zoom, and we're live streamed on YouTube. So just so you know, this is not a chat on house discussion or anything. We're live streaming everything as we go. So, in the European Council's conclusions before COP29, it was very clearly stressed the need for urgent climate action, rising global temperatures, extreme weather events, and ecosystem degradations affect all regions of the world. And in Romania, we're seeing a higher incidence of floods and of droughts. At the same time, the EU has committed itself very clearly to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 to net zero, and by 55% by 2030, with very concrete measures having been adopted in the past few years. At the same time, we must assure that we provide support for vulnerable groups and sectors that are at threat during the transition, to make sure that the transition is both just and equitable, in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement. So that's a general setting for the discussion that we're going to have in this panel. What I would like to do is to focus a bit on the specific challenges in Romania, both in aligning its climate action to international climate policy, how climate change is actually affecting Romania, what we're doing to adapt to climate change, and very importantly, to discuss how Romania can strengthen its position as a regional leader in climate action and drive meaningful progress. We've heard from Ms. Bokce earlier today that there is an expectation for Romania to lead alongside other countries in Europe on this topic. So without further ado, I would like to open up the panel with a question to all of you, a bit more of a general one. Which is, what are the key challenges Romania faces in aligning its climate action with the goal of keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees, and how are we preparing for constructive dialogues in international climate policy? And Mr. Țărnea, I would like to give the word first to you. That's okay.
Thank you very much. I hate to start interventions with caveats, but I will do so, and I'm forced to do so, particularly because it's a non-Chatham House event or a public event. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has very limited role in the substance of these matters. We are the main negotiating party of the Romanian government when it comes to international agreements, but when it comes to implementation and sectorial policies, we're not the competent institutions. Of course, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Energy, and a number of other authorities nationally and locally have the role of implementing those policies. There's also something that's very specific to areas covered by the COP, the spirit of COP agreements, that they are extremely complex when it comes to implementations. And this is true with the energy policy in general, but in particular, when you overlap environmental concerns and climate change with its complexity, social social sustainability, international security, and the economic implications of all those areas, whether in the form of international agreements or domestic implementation. Now, in the case of Romania, you have to add on the inherent complexity of operating as part of the European Union with its own policy-making challenges when it comes to whether social, economic, or energy or environmental policies. What that means, or what that implies, is that the main challenge, because that was your question, for a country like Romania, but it's true for most parties to the conference, is juggling all those competing policy mechanisms and policy decision-making processes to ensure that both the objectives of the agreement, but also the results actually match what we set out to do. And we see the challenges. We see it, years down the road. We're still grappling with the same fundamental difficulties. We see the implications in areas that are directly the remit of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, whether it's international security or the implications of international sanctions as a consequence of illegal military activities and wars, specifically the war that Russia started against Ukraine in 2014 and its full-scale war since 2022. All these require governments to walk, a tightrope and herding cats when it comes to both civil society, private sector, and intergovernmental actors that are required to align efforts in order to achieve those. Now, I know and I'm aware that prior speakers probably have mentioned these. The urgency cannot be more dire, I would say. We've heard just a couple of days ago an international group of major scientists talking about the impact that climate change has on current circulation in the Atlantic. It's a technical, very scientific, boring thing for the general audience, but it's one of those areas where you see the impact of climate change that is shaping not just El Nino and cyclical climate and meteorological phenomena, but impacts fundamental structural aspects of our climate that are very hard to deny in terms of the impact on economic sustainability, fisheries, global temperatures, and the impact it has on ecology, agriculture, food security, you name it. So yes, diplomats and the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs makes no exceptions. You've heard from colleagues that are borrowed from the MFA to the government of Romania or to the presidential administration or to other institutions, partly because indeed, while we have little role in implementing those policies, we do have the role of supporting this alignment of parties internationally and domestically in order to achieve those goals. I've spoken too long, but thank you so much.
Fantastic, and yeah. Thank you. And despite the caveats, I think your answer was very comprehensive. And indeed, I appreciate you highlighting the urgency and I think the importance of having these type of conversations of Romania engaging effectively in international climate diplomacy. And I really liked your point on how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but in international climate diplomacy in general, you need to juggle all these competing tensions, issues, things. Yeah. And I think in Europe, even more so, because you have to, first of all, advance national interest, but also balance it with a common European ground as a leader on climate action at global level. So like, of course, that's also a difficult act to do. I would like to move now to Mr. Banciu, which is now the Vice President of ANRM PSG, but I have to mention also the former State Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Waters, where he played a very important role in Romania's climate policy, both at national level, but also in European international negotiations. So very curious to hear your view on this.
Yeah, and thank Romanian Diplomatic Institute for hosting these discussions. I think the panel here is extremely well balanced. We have diplomacy, we have the science, and we have also the politicians that have, let's say, the most, I would say, complex role, not well understood, not trusted, but still in a position to take decisions that affect the future of so many people, and especially the future generations. I think I had this role in coordinating the long-term strategy for Romania and the adaptation strategy. All these were somehow on our hands in the Ministry of Environment, Waters and Forests. And I remember how complex the discussions and the negotiations were at national level. Now imagine them at European level and then at global level. Romania is somehow in a position that we are part of the EU, the most ambitious continent, but in the same time, we face the challenges of the global south sometimes on the same territory. So from a perspective of a country that negotiates climate change agreements or conventions, I think we have to play a better role in facilitating a dialogue. And I hate to split the world into the global south and the global north, but this is the reality that we are facing. I think Romania can and has to play a better role. We didn't do it. We didn't do it until now, I think, efficiently enough. But I think in the next phase, where we need to align all these ambitions, because there is a high concern that Europe goes very high with a high speed, advancing a very ambitious climate agenda, environmental agenda, biodiversity agenda, but there's no second place very close to Europe. So people are asking, why Europe needs to be always the most ambitious continent, and this has an impact on competitiveness and on jobs and on life of citizens and so on. On industry, of course, that is an important part. You have heard the Romanian government saying that we need to re-industrialize Romania and what types of industries we would like to have. So a lot of challenges in front of us, but I think Romania has performed very well in terms of climate agenda. And this is something that we need to say and present to all audiences, European and global. Partially it was an accident because the communist industry was vanished somehow. But we are also in a position to become a regional leader in providing energy. We have a high for nuclear, and we need to promote nuclear. This was one of my press interventions in the council. I don't know. I have maybe worried a lot of partners, country partners in the European Union, but this is the reality. And this differentiated approach, as I see it, and the ambassador of Brazil mentioned it, it is important. Every country has to have the right to decide their own mix of energy. We are much better than others. We have to be more visible and more proud of what we have achieved. And of course, we still need to defend the future of Romanian industry, of the Romanian economy and the Romanian people, because I think we have all the ingredients. We need more coordination between ministries. Of course, this is always an issue when we negotiate and discuss about a lot of things. A huge European legislative agenda that needs to be implemented, but also technologies and partnership with the civil society. On one hand, they need to understand and be part of this. For now, we are in two separate battlefields, talking separately with each other, and sometimes confronting even in court. And also companies, because they need to play a role here. The feasibility of the transition, it is important. Technologies that prove to be feasible will be adopted sooner, and this will help us achieve our targets. Otherwise, and also what an important another thing that I want to mention is the social acceptance of these policies. I'm a little bit afraid that if we explain in detail what does it mean for every individual in Romania, we will not have too much public support. And this is why we need to communicate. We need to explain that this is the only way we can be secure in a world or on a planet that seems to suffer, and we see, and we will hear Ms. Bojariu later about the risks and about the events that we are confronting with. So the social acceptance is important. Climate justice and climate and this transition that needs to be just for regions that are in poverty, including in Romania. This is why I say that Romania has to have a different role. We are placed in a context, a socio-economic context, that we can both understand countries like India or countries in Africa or Brazil, but also the developed countries. So because we have it all. We have it all in a small country, ambitious from a climate target perspective, but with challenges that are different from other Western European countries. And I will stop here because, I can talk a lot.
No, it's all right. I must confess, I ran out of space on my paper to take notes from all the points that you made, but they were all very important ones. And a couple of things that I wanted to highlight, and I particularly agree with. So part of those juggling of competing issues that we have to do is also the national prerogative to establish your own energy mix, which is established for European treaties, at the same time at which you have renewable targets, you have decarbonization targets. So another thing to add to what Mr. Cerna was saying earlier, it was very important that you mentioned that the EU is being very ambitious. I think that there's still a bit to show for in actual implementation until 2030. I think we're on the right way. But you said that the second place is very far away, which I agree. And I think this sort of pull effect that the EU needs to have, and here climate finance is key. It's unavoidable. And then diplomacy, yes, exactly. Increasingly more for a country like Romania as well. Just one thing that I wanted to mention as well is that for us as a part of civil society, you put us in a tough spot because it's usually a knee-jerk reaction to be critical of what the government does, of what the problems are. And to be very frank, we often do. Whenever there's a strategy that's being published, you receive 10, 15 pages from us with a lot of comments. But at the same time, we must admit that in the past few years, there's been a lot of progress in climate action in Romania, both at institutional level and in the institutional setup. The fact that we have now a fora where ministries can coordinate and cooperate, the fact that we have a long-term strategy and a political commitment to net zero, which us at EPG would like to see it put into law at some point, but it's a discussion for a separate room, perhaps. Yes.
Consider EPG a think tank.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit different. Still an NGO. I was an NGO, so I totally understand the role of NGOs. But in the communication part of the climate agenda, I see a better role for NGOs because they are more credible. And this is important. As a politician, you can say a lot of things.
Yeah. People
will hear you for the first minute, and then they will close the telephone or the TV and so on. So this is why I think this partnership is important.
No, you're right. We are a think tank. We do mostly boring, long reports. I was trying to make our work sound more exciting, but yeah, no, you are right. But with that being said, I've spoken for too long already. I wanted to give the floor to probably the most prominent climate scientist in Romania, Ms. Bojariu, for her opening perspective.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored, and I'm also grateful that I could represent the voice of science in such a good company. And I think that a key challenge for Romania, but not only for Romania, is to reach with scientifically informed decision, not only at center level, but to the very local level. And we saw examples of this key challenge, unfortunately, in this flooding event in Galați when I heard the mayors saying that they didn't take any action because they didn't receive any message from the prefect, yes, from the government representative in county. And it's pity because at the Romanian level, we have a network of committees for emergency situation, and they are organized at local levels. I mean, each administrative territorial unit has such a committee. And I think that this community of disaster risk management and the community interested in adaptation should come together. For example, these committees for emergency situation should have also a task related to adaptation, because I'm coming again to key challenges in Romania, but not only. Another key challenge in Romania is adaptation. As you already heard, we are dealing relatively well with emissions because not only because we have that accident, that huge intensive industry fall down, but in the last 10 years, let's say, Romanian economy is decoupled from emission. You could see that in figures, and this trend, of course, it's only a trend, and we hope to see it going further in the next years, but it's a reality. We are decoupled. We have larger gross domestic products in the conditions, under the conditions of lower emissions. So we are on the right way, but we need, of course, even for the emission mitigation, to go further. And of course, we have here challenges related to these new sectors which are coming in ETS on the European level, transport and buildings. Here we have huge challenges in emission, but the larger or more concerning key issue is adaptation, still adaptation, because we didn't succeed to reach the local level, the very local level, there where we have to action. We have to have actions because Romania has very different local factors. It's not an easy to model system. It's a nice system to be modeled because as a scientist, you have all sorts of things to put it in the model, but from the pragmatic point of view, it's very complicated, and you should go to that very local level to see the optimal solution, and then to follow the adaptation cycle with measures, and then seeing again what are the results of these measures, and going again with another diagnostic of what the situation is. So this local adaptation is approached in the new strategy for adaptation. I'm very happy that the national adaptation strategy has just been approved in August. So there you have, of course, the national coherent framework with sectoral measures and very concrete source of finance and who is responsible, things like this, because you have this action plan. But you will also have this platform trying to go to the with information to local area. We have developed a new platform, RODEPT, which has information data at the level of each administrative territorial unit as is functional. You could use it, and we hope to be one of the instruments to help people from the local level to develop their own adaptation plans, which are, of course, under this umbrella, national umbrella, because you should have this national coherency. Otherwise, you could have adaptation solution in one part, and the neighbors could suffer from your very narrow approach. So under this national approach, you have the chance to go to local area. No, you should go to the local area. And to go further, of course, we need science for all this, because we have to deal in this adaptation solution with a lot of trade-off, but also synergies between mitigation and adaptation. And in the most recent IPCC report, you could see the complexity of these trade-offs and synergies, and the need to have a solution, but also it's an optimistic message. We have the science, we have the technology to figure out how to go. Of course, it's an iterative process. I mean, you should always go and see what are the effects of your measures, and then do again risk assessment procedure in order to see how the risk is modified and so on in this ongoing adaptation cycle. But for this cycle, you need science, science-informed decision. Please, I would like to urge politicians, please be more open, more careful with science, having in mind that Romania spent last year, for example, for science, only 0.17%. We are at the bottom of European hierarchy of spending for science. And climate change is such an issue that needs not only climatology, needs all the science going together, because you have social consequences, you have ecosystem consequences, you have economic, anthropological consequences. So we need an area of research in our country that could respond to these knowledge challenges. Without science, we cannot go anywhere. And another point I would like to highlight is that we should not be fatalistic. We should not lose our optimism. Why? Because at this transformational transition to another type of society, economy, this green transition, all we are at the starting line. So from now on, we could go further, forgetting about our lagging behind in some areas or the other, because there are new constraints, there are new challenges, there are new opportunities. So let's surf on this wave of change, because it's our opportunity as a nation and as a European part and as a global part to go further and have better life, have economical development under climate change. It's possible with science, with technology, but also with wise politics, with all people, with diplomacy, with green diplomacy. Everybody with you, everybody should join in this effort, which is tremendous, and it's fascinating. You know, we are now at a tipping point, not only from climatological point of view, as you said about this Atlantic meridional circulation, but also we are on a tipping point from the social point of view, from our species point of view. We can go further together. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's always very sobering to hear such a clear call for action from climate scientists. And yeah, I can only say I completely agree. As a DPG, all we can do is take the science and try to transform it in policy. But the work that you do, our climate scientists in Romania, including, is incredibly important. There's a few things that you mentioned and talked a bit about climate adaptation. So the way I want to do this is, you said go local, basically, yeah, with the climate adaptation plans and everything. So coherently, but like what I wanted to ask you is if you could have a short follow-up about how do you see this link? So how are Romania's regions affected differently by climate change, and why are local adaptation strategies very important? And as a follow-up to that, then I would ask to go to Mr. Banciu, who was very involved in the development of the strategy, and also to understand a bit what challenges he sees to implementation. And Mr. Țărnea, I have a question for you from Ms. Bojariu's intervention earlier, but yeah, I will let you, Ms. Bojariu, to go first.
Romania has a lot of local factors which are responding, modulating the global signal. So the local response is shaped, is flavored, let's say, by these local factors, such as a high diversity of soil types. You have soil types like in southern Oltenia. You have very good for agriculture soil types such as Chernozem in many parts of Romanian plain and in other parts. And is the best soil for agriculture in Europe, like Ukraine also have very best soil for this Chernozem. But you also have this Carpathian chain, which modifies large-scale circulation, as you can imagine. You have the vicinity, the neighborhood of water corp, Black Sea. And you can imagine that near the Black Sea, you have the influence of the water more powerful than in the other region. In the mountain region, you have different levels with different climate as you climb up, because of course, as you climb up, for instance, temperature is going down, for instance, but also you have so many differences as a response to climate differences to in ecosystems. In intra-Carpathian region, you have slightly different evolution than in, let's say, Western plain or Southern plain, or the hydrographic structure is very complicated. You have characteristics which are very different in, for example, in Moldavia. There you could have different types of rivers, how they are gaining their resources in droughty situation from groundwater. This situation is different in different parts of Romania. So this type of different condition, very different. Romania is so different, for example, from Netherlands, where you have just plain area near a huge ocean. From the climatic point of view and from the other point of view, it's a more simple problem. We are happy as a scientist, but it's a complicated thing for practitioners to go in this, but it's possible. But it's possible with the best available science. And of course, we are with our all colleagues in this process, and IPCC is about an international community of scientists trying to find the ways and to face this climate change.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for this tour of force of all the different weather and the geographical conditions in Romania, and why understanding both the impact, but also addressing it in Romania is that much more complicated. And with that, I'm going to come with a tough question to you, Mr. Vancevic, is do you think the adaptation strategy is fit to respond to all these different issues, all these different contexts in Romania? And are you optimistic about the development of local adaptation plans?
I'm always optimistic, and we need to be, because I think what we are trying to do with all these strategies that we are developing and also implementing, hopefully, is to be sure that we fit to the limits of the planetary boundaries. And Roxana mentioned about biodiversity loss, which is an issue. I saw recently the WWF report, 73% of the species on Earth have disappeared, the ones that we know about. There are others that are identified. In terms of the strategy, I think this is the first step, to have a national strategy, to understand the risks. This is important. These are the information that every individual needs to know, because to implement a strategy starts with having the right information. And we have maps of risks of floods that are updated by scientists. We try to follow science as politicians. We are not doing all the time this. We are not doing it all the time. Unfortunately, we are more, let's say, sensitive to public perception, which in many of the cases is turmoiled or disturbed or influenced by factors that we can't control. So we have the national strategy. It was based on models, on climatic models. We have worked with the National Meteorological Administration. So it was developed by scientists. Of course, we had to negotiate it within the ministry, because you have a strategy, but then you have an action plan. And in the action plan, you start discussing who needs to do what. And this is a big issue in Romania. And I think also in other countries, because to implement an adaptation strategy is not something easy. You need always to understand where the weather is going, and then take a measure and see what's happening, and then work in circles and have the feedback and then readapt and so on. But I think we should start with simple things, and to think with things that we have at our fingers. These maps of risks of flooding that are accurate, that are public, and nobody use it. And I think this is an issue, because if we look at the development plans of communities, how people are building houses and sometimes blocks of flats, it's totally contradicting what we have in our strategies. If we ask a tough question, not to a politician, but maybe to mayors, how the development plans were developed, how people are building, how many of the houses that are affected by floods are constructed or built in high-risk areas, we will have a very uncomfortable answer. So planning of future developments at least should be done more carefully, and overlapping all these maps that we have, and we have been invested a lot of efforts and a lot of money to have it. And I really hope that mayors and developers and I don't know, architects of cities will use it, because otherwise we will continue to have problems. We will continue to spend money on paying for damages. The insurance companies will say, no, we will not pay money for a house that was destroyed in a risk area because you knew it, and so on. So we need to get out of this circle and think strategically. And of course, local adaptation plans are important. And there are a few communities that have already done it, not enough of them, but we hope that now with the development of the national adaptation strategy, they will have the national background or the national framework to develop it and to be coherent, because this is important. Even if risks are different in different regions of the countries, the measures need to be coherent, because this is the only way we can adapt to climate change. That is a certainty, with lower costs for people, budgets, but also unfortunately lives that we lose because of these awful impacts.
Appreciate your intervention, and again, I agree with the fact that You need national guidelines to make sure that the way Romania develops is in line with what we know about how climate change will have an impact. But at the same time, when it comes to the adaptation measures, you need that degree of flexibility. Yeah, try, test, adapt. Yeah, very, very important. So also stemming from something Ms. Bojariu said, I'm turning to Mr. Țărnea. So Ms. Bojariu said that Romania has decoupled its growth from emissions, which is true. It's true in Europe, it's true in North America, but it's not yet true in the global south and in much of the developing world. So I'm turning with a rather tough question to you, Mr. Țărnea, which is also following up on Ms. Bocșe's call for Romania to provide some leadership, which is how can Romania strengthen its role in international climate finance? And I know we don't have the Ministry of Finance here with us today, and the capacity building efforts to help those most vulnerable countries in their pathway to adapt and to contribute to mitigation of climate change.
I have a diplomatic response, and then later on I put a citizen hat, and I'm going to answer it that way as well. First and foremost, as I said in my prior intervention, Romania does not operate alone. So we have the advantage of leveraging the incredible resources, including financial and structural resources brought by the European Union. So whenever we act as a network as a diplomatic network of green embassies, for example, we don't just speak for Romanian government policies, but we can coordinate. We have this incredible power of coordinating with our EU partners and operate in sync, whether with the European Commission delegations in those countries, and thus, again, leveraging those opportunities, including financing opportunities, whether it's through EIB or other structural financing instrument through development and cooperation instruments, including in shaping the whole set of legal agreements that we have with non-European countries in the global south, whether sub-Saharan Africa or Latin America, in order to do so. Now, there's another element there. As a transition country itself, Romania, because you mentioned the legacy industries of the communist regime and the transition it had to do almost anthropologically, and you mentioned it again, in order to adapt a society to both a capitalist mode of production and the imperatives of overlapping global challenge of climate change with its own constraints. And then see whether certain lessons learned from our own implementation, whether I'm thinking in social areas, whether our Just Transition Fund and how we implement that can operate as an example, either positive or negative, in terms of how transition to a new economic model is achievable. Then there is another role that, because this whole event takes place under the aegis of COP28, 29, and the role of further presidencies of the Convention of Parties in order to further that. Those are diplomatic opportunities to interact with the global south. I hate the term. Again, it's rather meaningless when you look at the diversity of actual, real, social, economic, cultural, institutional, legal aspects that are representative of those. It's mostly a political tool in voting at UN, and it's meaningless in practice. We should go beyond it, because it's to me as a diplomat, it's rather a steel ball chained to our imagination when it comes to solutions in interacting with countries in, again, sub-Saharan Africa, Mediterranean region, Latin America, or South Asia or East Asia. And thus, we can tailor, and we are, as European Union, but also Romanian government, increasingly following those steps, tailoring its positions. And I'll give you one example that it's a very generic one, but does apply to our conversation. Romania has launched relatively recently a grand strategy for Africa. And it's its first structural document that puts together diplomatic imagination and the activity across the board in the Romanian government in a geographic in a coherent geographic area where it's almost a return to policies. But instead of operating with the ideologically driven policies of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and we're in a building that reflects that era, vis-a-vis Latin America, but it could have been, might as well sub-Saharan Africa. We're returning to Africa, and it's conceived as a return to, with a full spectrum of interventions. Some of those interventions, and here again, some of the prior speakers, particularly your intervention, Mr. Bojariu, is relevant because one of the dimensions of Romania's strategy to Africa relates to education. And that may sound remote from our conversation, but it is in fact, and I'm looking at Radu, knowing his capacity as an academic, that one of the areas where Romania is particularly well suited and well positioned is to increase this scientific and academic exchange with countries in the global south, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, as in my example, and expand that relationship. Already, the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs runs, together with the Ministry of Education, 500 scholarships annually for bachelor's, MA, and PhDs that are offered mostly to youngsters from those countries. And that can be matched with a layer of a cooperation in development, cooperation specifically designed for climate change, whether it's scientific training, engineering, urban design, architecture, you name it, to address climate-specific challenges in those countries and include them in a coherent policy. I'll stop right here, and I'll revert to my citizen example maybe at the end of the conversation. Thank you.
All right, no, fantastic. I think even your diplomatic answer was already very comprehensive and promising, and glad to hear that Romania is already branching out. Before I give the word to Ms. Popescu, I just wanted to say, if you have questions in the room or online, prepare them. I will turn to you in a minute. So, Ms. Popescu.
Very short, very brief commentary on what my colleague from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was saying. We have a special relationship with Elcano Institute, and its director, Charles Powell, made a presentation in the Institute, and we held an event together with Latin American ambassadors and countries, and they coined the term plural South rather than global South. And starting from this concept, maybe we can think of adding the plural North, because Romania kind of joined the North fairly recently. And maybe, we can look at the, plural South and plural North as being a continuum. And then, kind of, build on that in our relationship with Africa and with Latin America and so on and so forth. Just terminological thing.
No, but I think it's very useful, and I think it complements well what Mr. Țărnea said earlier about Romania's experience from the transition, and precisely being in this position in which we have transition, not almost or not in the OECD yet. We're probably getting there, hopefully. But this precise position means that we have a wealth of experience to share with the world. So I'm turning to the room to see if there's any questions, but I'm not going to take your question first. Okay, if there's nothing else, then Radu Dudău from EPG.
Yeah, thank you. I was prompted by quite a few things, first raised by Roxana Bojariu, and of course we would agree that we need to have this raw alert system really up and running and trusted as well, and a bit better than the Hurricane Ashley instance, which kind of saps public confidence. And it's a bit self-defeating to cry wolf. But some would say better to cry wolf than not. But the longer-term effect is undermining confidence. But this is part of the discussion. The other was also developed by yourself and Jonas Banchu, which is okay, if we learn things the hard way with these flash floods come sweeping houses and then in the countryside and so, and then who bears the costs eventually? Okay, people have no insurance. They are not insurable at this point, I suppose. There is, by the way, exactly this conversation these days in the US about spiking insurance premiums and even uninsurable houses and in dream locations. That's one thing. Who's going to bear the cost on the long term? And finally, I wanted to raise something that I think is important, which is how do we respond to misinformation and disinformation? Because part of the society is really has extracted themselves of even from contemplating this. And I want to point a bit of particular responsibility here. I think you as climate scientists, not you as a person, but your ilk, if you like, should become a bit more involved. I mean, I understand the comfort of researchers. They want to be left alone with their research. But I'm afraid we don't have that luxury anymore. When you have some hotbeds of public disinformation, people publishing unbothered article after article, and they face no reaction. I mean, somebody should step up. And so I think there is a this sort of responsibility of communicating science, and then you'll be, of course, entitled to expect from decision makers to pay more attention to science. Thank you.
Thank you for the very relevant question. I think it's relevant for all the panelists, not just for Ms. Bargiu. Just one thing to say before that, if there's no more questions in the room, I think I will take this opportunity to also ask you if you have any concluding remarks after you answer Mr. Dudau's question to also mention those. So Ms. Bargiu, probably the most.
Pretty much. That is why adaptation is also about co-design measures with people. I mean, everything should be done with the citizen in the center, not as an abstract vision of, I don't know, energy independence or something. No, citizens should be always in the center of local adaptation. Of course, this should be harmonized in such a way that at national level you have also a sustainable energetic system and so on and so on. But everything should go from citizens, and citizens should be involved from the first step of this adaptation. Of course, with scientists, we need networks of scientists and citizens. And about disinformation, you know, I've cried. It's just how can I say? I feel a little bit guilty, so I would like to say that I've cried on the Facebook. It's not any actually happening in Romania. Now it's happening in Ireland and Scotland. As you know, Ashley was a name stormed by our colleagues from Island Meteorological Service. So we try to step up, but you know, it's an effort should be done on a larger scale, not only by us. I mean, I feel the need for different type of education. Of course, we have this strategy for environment and the climate change, which was initiated by some reports from presidential administration. We have all this on the table, but we should put in practice more. We have nice examples of pupils coming even in our meteorological administration, but we have to do more for universities and for every citizens, in fact. So yeah, scientists should communicate, and we will try to make this, but not only us, we have to go together in this endeavor. And yeah, and again, hand in hand with our neighbors, our every citizen, you know. So it's very important to go to this granularity of citizen level.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for outlining.
Sorry for
no,
being-
it was all very very insightful. What I must say though is that sometimes misinformation creeps in at the highest levels of powers and of power, and we've seen that with the U.S. When they withdrew from the Paris Agreement. And I'm turning with a tricky question to you, Mr. Țărnea, which is, how do we deal with disinformation and misinformation when it affects even global players like the United States, and it affects the intensity and magnitude to which we can take climate action at a global scale?
Between ideology and ideology-driven decision-making, and which is which is actually a prerogative of any democratically elected government, whether in US or Romania. But do want to answer the impact that disinformation, misinformation has on this field. This is my bread and butter as Director General for Communication at the MFA. This is what my colleagues in the Public Diplomacy and Strategic Communication Department are dealing with on a daily basis. This is what we do, whether coordinating with our EU partners in networks addressing foreign information manipulation and interference from state or non-state actors like Russia, but also increasingly at NATO level, at senior communicator level, and through a network of points of contacts nationally. Energy and energy-related topics, including climate change, are a significant part of the disinformation content. And I would use rather the term that I mentioned earlier, foreign information manipulation and interference by state actors are literally one of the most, one of the first, longest lasting, and I'm only going to mention a name that for the experts in the room will ring a bell, Chevron. We've seen a whole set of hybrid tools being employed that included targeting civil society, church groups, religious communities, online, offline, politicians, the full spectrum. We only going to see more of that. On the background of Russia's illegal and unjustified war against Ukraine, we already see this taking place on a daily basis, whether inflaming communication about cow farts in the Netherlands and their impact on CO2, or literally, or whether it's about Europe freezing because of cutting energy ties with Russia, et cetera, et cetera. So we've heard all of those. Now, those may be the most ludicrous one. It doesn't mean that they don't have impact, because they operate in a mass communication environment without the checks and balances that classical media had. And in the new context, even conventional media plays increasingly not a tempering or educational role or pedagogical role, giving voice to scientists or data-based conversations, but rather amplifying and competing with social media for audiences, and thus playing a negative role in this general conversation. But you mentioned Netherlands and their specificity in terms of energy. They're also Europe's first natural gas producer, Romania being the second, and with the potential of Romania becoming the first natural gas producer in the European Union. That comes with significant structural risks, including infrastructural risks. So when you look at hybrid threats, including those referring to disinformation and misinformation related to energy, we need to pay even more attention, whether the policy discussion domestically related to Romania's role in an important transition element. Natural gas, it's not necessarily a sustainable, but it's a critical, because its lower gas CO2 impact is a critical element in the energy transition process. Thus, for Romania, both an incredible opportunity as an EU member regionally and across Europe, but also in terms of paying playing its part in combating disinformation in this field. So again, we're doing it on day-to-day basis. We're aligning and we're building strategic tools, various toolboxes to discover, to monitor, and to address disinformation. And indeed, it needs to be a partnership between the community of experts, science, academia, a longer-term resilience process through education, a partnership with media and social media in terms of addressing blatant, glaring disinformation actors on and offline, but also a political responsibility act when it comes to naming names and shaming the most blatant misinformation and disinformation actors in the political circles. And I'll stop there.
Fantastic. And us at EPG as well, we're struggling with this as well because we fear that misinformation, disinformation is a real threat to developing almost any infrastructure project nowadays. For us, a big part of our work has also been on carbon capture and storage. And we think that there in particular, I'm looking at Mr. Bunch as well, if not handled properly, there can be a lot of backlash, which can, at the end of the day, stop us from reaching the climate targets that we have set. I'm turning for the last intervention to Mr. Bunch with the same question on misinformation, disinformation. And if you can also tie it, I like that you brought in the role of civil society in your initial intervention. If you think civil society has a role to play in this as well, I'd be very happy to hear your thoughts on that as well.
I think, first of all, we need to translate science to people because they don't understand it. Science is something very abstract, and this is why misinformation goes very deeply in every single house and every single mind. And you know what? Politicians are not sensitive to science because they are sensitive to what people believe is the reality, and this is public perception. And the same with some part of the civil society. We all work with public perception, and this is why education is very important. We have launched several initiatives, Green Week, also with funds, because if people do not understand what is the reality and they cannot differentiate a misinformation or a fake from a reality, they will push for the wrong decisions, and politicians will follow this wrong decision. And this is the connection I see between science and policymaking. It has to go through people that need to understand that this is the right answer and not the others that are on social media. And this is something very complicated to handle. Of course, we can select a few politicians that will have to blame, but in the same time, we also need to select politicians that have the guts to take the right decisions with the cost of losing their mandates. And this is not happening too often. And I think this is very, very, very important because at some point, the society will wake up and will understand that sometimes you need to push your community into the right direction with the cost of your own mandate. This is what great leaders are doing. I mean, they have worked to push or to take over their communities into what they believe was the right direction. And we have several examples of leadership in the history of humanity. Less and less nowadays, I have to confess. So this is important. And now going back to the civil society. Civil society or NGOs, they need to represent the communities they are working for. And this is not always the case. Sometimes they seem to represent a larger groups of the society, but we don't see it. If we will have a poll now to ask Romanians how many of them understand why do we need the climate law, for example, or to reduce emissions, or to introduce carbon taxing for heating and transport, something that needs to be done because we have already agreed at European level that this will happen, and we have asked for money to ensure that this transition will be just. And we have to, and we will support the most vulnerable companies and citizens as well. We will have a very sad answer. And this sad answer will create decision to go for a certain law or withdraw it. And this is why we discussed with my colleague in the parliament that climate law is a very good idea, but it needs to be put forward at the right moment and with the right communication in front. Why do we need it? Because with the long-term strategy, it was easier. It was ministry to ministry. There were one that were more stubborn, one were more cooperative, but we did it. It's not perfect, but at least we have what we want for a long term. So I think these are the thoughts that I wanted. And again, the civil society NGOs are more credible, and I think we should use them strategically to communicate to the people, because it's just simple as that. They will not trust the politician as much as they will trust. Unfortunately, this is what I see, and it is worrying, is that civil societies have lost credibility in the Romanian society. Maybe I'm not in the position to assess this properly or objectively, but this is what I feel, that they have lost trust. And then if there's no channel of communication that is credible, then we already lost this fight. Thank you.
And thank you. No, and I think it's things like this today where it's civil society and politicians, scientists, and the public officials that come together and discuss the types of issues that can bridge that trust gap. Ms. Popescu, do you want to have a final intervention before we wrap up?
Actually, I just wanted to thank to the participants. I think it was a very enriching session, very vivid, non-formal, and I think we are going to leave this room with very fruitful ideas in terms of action, including for our courses in the Institute. I'm sorry that the presidential advisor is not here any longer with us, but I also wanted to thank very much to my team, organizing team, who helped a lot in this to organize this event. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Perhaps not according to protocol, but I would like to also, take the final word to thank the panelists. So, Mr. Țărnea, Mr. Banciu, and Ms. Bojaiu, thank you very much. We covered a lot of ground, I think, a very rich discussion, but I appreciate you taking up this challenge. I would like to thank the Diplomatic Institute of Romania for co-organizing this event with us. I think it was a very timely initiative. Your team and also our team, especially, so my colleagues Ioana, Caterina, that are here with us, Ciprian, as well. Thank you very much for your contributions, for making this happen, and hopefully, who knows, maybe we'll make it a yearly event. But with that, I think we have lunch waiting for us. I'll let you, Ms. Popescu, to wrap it up. Like, I think it's outside the room. We'll guide you if you want to hang around. Yeah, thank you.